Adolph Sutro was born in 1830 in the kingdom called Prussia. He was the third child born to Emanuel and Rosa Sutro, and eventually he would have 10 brothers and sisters. It was a loud, busy, bustling family, and each child was encouraged to explore the things that interested them. Adolph went to a school that prepared students for practical occupations, excelling at science and mathematics. Mesmerized by watching the machinery in his father's wool mill, he liked to figure out how things worked. He once found a broken clock that had been thrown away and fixed it, and built his own personal steam engine. Adolph had a small chemical laboratory where he conducted many experiments. He especially liked to make small explosions. When he was 16 years old, his parents bought him a telescope, and he spent many nights studying the stars. But that year, when Adolph's father was thrown from his carriage and died of his injuries, Adolph's whole life changed. Adolph had to leave school, and he and his older brother took over the management of their father's mill. 2 years later, in 1848, there was a revolution in Prussia, and Adolph's life was further thrown apart. His mother decided to sell the mill. His brother took a job in America, and he took a job as manager of a cloth mill being built in Memel, a port in the Baltic Sea. Upon trying to establish the cloth mill, Adolph immediately noticed a huge problem. There was no source of clean water, which was needed to process the wool. So he found a small stream on the outskirts of town and made arrangements to have a pipe laid that would bring the water to the mill. In 1850, Adolph's mother decided to move the entire family to America. Adolph quit his job in Memel, packed up several bolts of cloth produced by the mill, and went with his family to Baltimore, Maryland. Shortly after arriving, he learned about the gold rush to California, and seduced by the opportunity, he decided to go. He planned to seed his ventures by selling the cloth he brought from Memel, along with 2 trunks full of fancy notions, which are clothing ornaments such as buttons and snaps and cuffs. He would make his fortune and then return to Baltimore and share his wealth with his mother. It was no small task to get across all of America to join the Wild West. Adolph traveled by ship to Panama, and then crossed the isthmus via canoe. The mosquitoes were so thick they filled the air, the rain pouring in buckets at night. Adolph slept in his canoe for 4 nights while they traveled, and then he joined a mule train at Cruces. He hired a mule to ride and 3 pack mules to carry his cloth and notions. When he fell asleep that night, someone had stole his riding mule, so he had to walk the 7 miles to Panama. Adolph waited 6 days in Panama before finding passage aboard a steamship that was headed to California. He could not bring his bales of cloth, but did take his 2 trunks of notions. They set sail for San Francisco on November 1st, 1850. When he arrived in San Francisco, he found a job with a store that sold crockery, glass, and china. He slept under the counter and was in charge of fire watch. One night, a man tried to rob him, and he was slashed on the cheek. To cover the scar, he grew his trademark mutton chops, which he wore for the rest of his life. After a couple of years, Adolph moved to Stockton to work in a store owned by his cousin. There he sold clothing, shoes, cloth, and notions. He and his cousin both slept on the floor of the store. Inventions and projects were always spinning in his head. Adolph once sang, "When I am alone, I think about one subject and another that interests me. My recreation is largely in thinking." Adolph continues to work at the store with his cousins as years pass. He gets married and has 3 daughters, Emma, Victorian, and Gussie. In 1859, there was news of a gold and silver strike east of the Sierra Nevada. Adolph traveled to see the place for himself. After watching the Arasta process for extracting gold and silver from quartz ore, which is a primitive method of just crushing the ore with rocks, he became convinced that he could develop a more efficient process. Adolph returned to Sacramento and went into partnership with John Rondor, a German chemist he had met on the ship from Panama. They spent 2 years perfecting their process for extracting gold and silver. In 1863, when the process was ready to be used, Sutro returned to the silver boom in the Sierra Nevadas. It was now called the Comstock Lode. He established in Dayton and had 8 stamps and 20 amalgamating pans, along with an assay office. He also had 2 roasting furnaces that were 12 feet in diameter and could roast 1 ton of ore at a time. As the mine shafts on the Comstock were dug deeper and deeper, they got hotter and hotter, and hot water started filling up the shafts. At 1,500 feet deep, the water was 110 degrees, and so was the air. The air was not only hot, but foul. Breathing it could cause the miners not only to faint, but to die. The mines installed pumps to remove the water, but running the pumps was expensive and difficult, and the miners still needed a way to get fresh air. As he worked his mill, Adolph had an idea. He believed the Comstock needed a tunnel, quote, which at once ensures drainage, ventilation, and facilitates the work of the mines. Adolph envisioned a tunnel, 10 feet high and 12 feet wide. It would have a trough at the bottom, which is like a little river, 3 feet deep and about 2 feet wide, where the water from the mines would discharge. He'd build a platform to cover the trough and install tracks so that rail cars could be used to carry the ore down the mountain for processing. His proposition of the tunnel was met with mockery. Nobody believed it would be possible. But when his mill burned down later that year, he decided not to rebuild the mill, instead focusing on the grander vision of the tunnel. Adolph then set out to raise money. He won the support of William Sharon, the Virginia City branch manager of the Bank of California. Sharon changed his mind when he heard the rest of Adolph's plan, which was to charge the mines every time they used this tunnel, and to build a town called Sutro at the mouth of the tunnel. Adolph was able to gain the approval of state and federal governments, and he thought they would help him pay the cost of building the tunnel, but they asked him to come back to them after he had first found part of the money somewhere else. Adolph formed the Sutro Tunnel Company, selling stock certificates to raise funds for its construction. Financing also came from local miners, motivated by the prospect of improved mine safety, after a fire in April of 1869 killed at least 35 miners in the Yellow Jacket mine. Construction finally began, and it went on for 9 years, until September 1st, 1878, when the tunnel crew reached the Savage mine in Virginia City. The tunnel worked. It drained the water. The north and the south branches of the tunnel that went under the mines were completed in 1879. When it was complete, the tunnel was 20,500 feet long. That's 3.88 miles. Its north and south branches extended 3,600 feet. At full operation, it drained from 7 to 14 million gallons of water per day. Unfortunately, by the time Sutro's tunnel was available for use, many of the mines had been dug deeper than his tunnel. This meant the water had to be pumped up from the bottom of the mine until it reached the tunnel. Then it could drain out. Also, by this time, the Comstock Lode had entered a decline, and its ore cars weren't used as much as Adolph thought they would be. Ingeniously, the tunnel could also be used for transportation to Virginia City by the people in the neighboring towns. They rode in buggies and carts on rail wheels from the mouth at Sutro to the Savage Shaft, about 2,000 feet below Virginia City. Then they would go to the surface and safety cages and take a wagon into town. In 1880, Adolph sold his tunnel and moved to San Francisco. There, his Comstock fortune helped him build the Sutro Baths and the Sutro Library. He was the mayor of San Francisco from 1895 to 1897. Adolph Sutro died in 1898, but his engineering marvel on the Comstock continues to drain hot water from the historic mines of Virginia City.